Welcome everyone. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Welcome to the NGPS AGM. You'll notice a sign probably appearing to say that we're recording the meeting. If anybody isn't happy with that, then you can turn your camera off or leave the meeting, but that's so that others can watch it who aren't able to attend. Just briefly, I'm Natalie Crowe. I'm a GP. I'm the chair of NGPS, and with me in the room are Chris, Emily and Annie, who are members of our senior leadership team, and Rebecca, sitting at the front here, obviously the CEO of the company. How many people have we got on the call? I think we're just checking whether we're quorate to continue the meeting. As per the Articles of Association, we need 50% of our membership present in order for this to be deemed an AGM, and I think we're pretty much there.
Yeah.
Now, yeah. Are you happy that you've?
I am happy.
Your list.
So, yeah, got my list. Happy. Good. Made some notes. Just a quick one, Nat, to add in. Joanna is on the call as well. Our final member of SLC, just because Joanna, our newest member as well, with some nice glasses.
Do you want to move on to the slide? So I'll just quickly run through the agenda. I think we've established that we are quorate. The quoracy is important, but actually there are no planned resolutions or special resolutions that I'm aware of that we would need to be voting on this evening, but still is a formality that we need to achieve, so that's fine. We'll continue the meeting. Once again, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. The meeting is only scheduled to last up to 45 minutes. We're going to try and keep it short and snappy. We've all got better places to be on a Tuesday night, and Rebecca in particular has got to be at an LMC meeting, so we'll definitely be finishing on time, if not before. So the point of the meeting tonight, the AGM, is we are looking at the financial year of February 21 to March 22. Always with these things, it's always a little bit strange. We're almost 12 months behind that time. So it's obviously we're trying to cast our minds back to what was going on during that year. You'll remember, if you were at the AGM last year, that we had uncovered quite a hole in the finances of one of the practices that we run. And those accounts showed that. These accounts, which are, as I say, nearly 12 months old, show the ongoing issues that Elsick Family Practice was facing at that time, which is no surprise to anyone. We obviously talked about that last time. Happily, the incredible work that Tracy Carr has undertaken over the last 12 months means that has totally been turned around. But tonight's meeting is focusing on those financial accounts from 21 to 22, and Rebecca's going to talk through those in a bit more detail in a minute. We'll then be moving on to talking about the new activity, what we've been doing since that time, and what we're planning to do in the coming year, which is where the really interesting stuff comes in. And then there'll be an opportunity for questions and comments from anyone that's in the meeting. So I think at that point, I'll hand over to you, Rebecca, and you can take it from here.
Marvellous. Thank you very much, Nat, for that intro. And just a big thank you to you all. It's 6 o'clock. You're all dialing in to a virtual meeting, and this is the best attendance that we've ever had. We've got 17 practices here, and that's 18 practices here, and some multiple people from practices as well. So just a really big thank you for your engagement. The way I'd like to do this is for me to present quite a quick presentation, and then to encourage engagement from you via questions, comments, feedback, whatever that might be. We had a pretty challenging but good discussion last year, and I'd really encourage everybody to do the same this year. But we will keep it to 45 minutes. Everybody's going to get a copy of our annual report. I sent this out to PMs last night, but we'll also send you a hard copy, and we'll send that wider to our stakeholders as well. But the sequencing that we're doing here is we're presenting to you, our members, first, and then we'll send out our annual report following this evening's meeting. So some folk haven't been to an AGM before. Not many of you. I recognise most, if not all, names. So I'm going to whiz through this because some of you, especially those of you that I've been visiting, I've been into a fair few practices over the last 3 months or so, and you will have seen this before. So mindful that some of you are new to our AGM, but there's not many of you, so I am going to whiz through this. The folks in this room have seen this more times than I care to remember anyway, so they definitely want me to whiz through. So Nat and I are here this evening to answer your questions, but there's a much wider team at NGPS as well. A number of them are here today. I can see a couple of them on the call as well. But I wanted to remind you what that small but perfectly formed team does. And there's our most recent photograph of the team, just to remind you that we are a small group. Location-wise, we're behind Gosforth Pool. We've only existed since 2014. We're a limited company and our shares are limited by you, our members. So as our members, you hold a share in our organisation. No VAT, easy contracting, data sharing agreements. We're an employing authority from a pension perspective. And this small team is led by a board of directors who are jobbing GPs. They're all on the call this evening, and they are our primary care network clinical directors, as well as the directors of our board at NGPS. Many of you who have, thank you so much, invited me into practices have been subject to the quiz that I start my presentations with. And I ask everybody if they've heard of NGPS. A lot of folk have heard of it, largely thank you to our efforts on the vaccine programme. But when I ask the same people in the room to describe the point of the Fed, everybody goes far more quiet. I hope they won't after my visit, because in the visit, I'm trying to stress to everybody that our purpose is to serve our practices, and that we can do that in 2 key ways. And the first is to ensure the voice of GP isn't lost. It's not about saying what you all think at all times and being a representative that perhaps you haven't signed up to be. It's about making sure the voice isn't lost in a system. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what I mean by system later on. And it's also the simple, pragmatic, doing things once when it makes sense. Sometimes it just makes sense to do stuff once. Sometimes it makes sense to do things 7 times and sometimes 30 times. But collectively, if we're governed by the same group of people, we can make some really strategic and clever decisions about where things sit and try and reduce the burden for everybody working together. And that takes me on to my final point on this slide, which is that federations, primary care networks and practices can all work in complete harmony. There is plenty to go around, and if we put in place the right processes to ensure that it's done in a really efficient way, there's actually really good space for 3 different organisations with 3 different functions. I'm sorry that that's dead small on the slide. Essentially what it's saying is the point of a Fed is to do stuff once. And in our case, the Federation serves the full 300,000 people of Newcastle. A primary care network really focuses on that population of 30 to 50,000 and their needs at that population health level. And the practice is the continuity of care, the complex, coordinated sense of team. And I think those 3 things can really work in harmony, and there's space for us all. I like visuals. You might have guessed, oh, just go back one. A lot of you have seen this before, but another question on my quiz when I'm visiting practices is how many practices are there in Newcastle? There are 30. It's a bit of a moving feast, but there are 30 practices. Every practice is a member of one of 7 PCNs. And those 7 PCNs are led by the same folk that are leading NGPS. So their 7 faces are up there on the screen, and they're meeting every month with every practice in the city. And then they are coming together as a group every month. and discussing the needs and the experiences of their practices. So for the first time, and it is the first time, we've never had this before, we do have a direct route to practices for practices to talk about their experiences, what they need, and for that to be fed back through the clinical directors on a monthly basis. Okay, so that was a bit of a welcome and a reminder about who we are, what we do. I'm going to get into the accounts now. We show this slide every year we show our turnover, and every year I say the same thing, which is that turnover is all good and well. You can see that there's been a really big leap in this year under review. And again, just to reiterate what Nat has said, we're nearly a year later than these accounts are talking about. So these accounts take us to the 31st of March 22, and obviously we're approaching the end of March 23, but that's just how the system works. That big leap in turnover is pretty much attributable to the vaccine programme. So we were knee deep in the vaccine programme at this point. And those of you that attend those PCN board meetings know that a large amount of that turnover then went back out to PCNs via our £6 per head. We did, however, as I hope this isn't news to any of you, though all of you that were on the AGM last year will have been party to this, we did make a loss this year, and it was to the tune of nearly £250,000. It was driven by a big black hole that suddenly became apparent in one of our practices, and I can't thank the practice enough for what they have done to turn that around. We've got new management in, we've had an audit performed, we've enhanced our financial scrutiny at NGPS. It's completely turned around, and it's now a really healthy financial position. So that's a fantastic news story, and big kudos to the management at that practice, because really it's totally down to them. They've been brilliant. The year that we're discussing, I'm going to talk about quite quickly, because it wasn't I was part of NGPS, but I want to talk more about what we're doing now and what we're going to do going forward. So here is a quick snapshot of the activity that was taking place that has driven that turnover. The vaccination programme, PCN support, the comms campaign, the Be Kind campaign that's showing in one of those pictures there, the hot services. But for me, it all feels quite a long time ago now, given it was nearly a year ago. And what I'd really like to talk about is going forward. So, as I said, we did finish the activity in that vaccine programme around May 22. And one of the biggest focuses that we had at that time from the vaccine programme was to try and find our place in this new structure that's being developed, the Integrated Care Board. And going back to the 2 points of us, if our point is to feed what you're experiencing into the big system, we had to establish at that point of significant change how we were going to do that. And we started concentrating on that pretty much straight away. What I did want to do was bring up this graphic again, which shows you all and the PCNs that you're linked to, and make the point that the CDs have elected a chair, Nat, and that Nat has been invited to Collaborative Newcastle. And this is a busy slide, but I'm just going to whiz through it to show you, to try and put into reality what I mean by talking into the system. So the system is in its simplest form on the left-hand side. And this was when, as of July last year, 8 CCGs merged into one integrated care board that has a budget of £6 billion and serves nearly 3 million people. That place board at the bottom of the left-hand side, the Federation and Nat in her position as elected chair has a place on that place board and is talking into that system meeting on a fortnightly basis, and I go as well, and it's a great opportunity to link in with all of our other partners. The ICB are there, and then eventually via the North Area ICP, the Integrated Care Partnership, which Nat is also attending and got an invite to today, eventually right up to the top to North East and North Cumbria Integrated Care Board. We're going to see how that works out. It's the biggest integrated care board in the country. Look at that, what it's got to manage: 64 primary care networks, 11 foundation trusts and 13 local authorities. So we're going to see how that pans out. But the important thing for us as a federation and for you as practices is our voice isn't being lost. We've got a seat at that table and you've got a direct route to tell us what you want us to say. This is another busy slide, but again, to try and cut down the presentation, I wanted to share with you all what I share with my CDs every month and progress against it, and what I'm seeking to achieve in the first 12 months with the help of the folks at the table and Joanna and other members of the team that are on the call. So I'm not asking you to read that. I'm going to pick out some main points from this slide. First thing, and I've referenced this already, is I thought it was really important that we reconnect and try and impress you as our members. And I've visited, I'm going to check this number, 13 GP practices in the last 2.5 months. And if I haven't been into your practice and been into your practice management team, I would love to come in. So if you'd be willing to have me, please reach out after the call and let me come and talk to your team. The purpose of that roadshow, as I'm calling it, is to deliver to your team a bit of a condensed version, a bit more snappy version of what I'm doing to you tonight, which is to try and get across the point of the federation that we want to support practices and how we want to go about doing that. So I've been going round and reconnecting and trying to reconnect with all of our practices as much as possible. And all of the SLT here have an objective to try and go into practices and talk to practice managers and GP partners and GP salary and anyone they can get hold of in practices as much as possible. What we're also trying to do is make Dobson House here, where we're all based, a bit more of a hive of activity. So we're inviting practices to use this space whenever they wish. We've been using it for training. Our nurses, our GP fellows are here. We've created a training room. And again, we'd really like that interaction to be increased as much as possible. So if you need space, please do use our office. Totally free. We'll try and bring you in with cake, and we've got nice coffee and all that sort of stuff. I wanted to reassure my team. This was quite a big change for them. So there's been a lot about internally concentrating on our team and making them feel secure, giving them motivation, I hope, happiness. She'll be smiling in the background, feeling agile, all the good things that we can do at NGPS. And I wanted to 5-star our existing services. So in October last year, with Jane Aitken from the ICB, we pulled together the People Plan, which Chris has been championing and launched at Tyne in October. It sometimes can feel a bit helpless in the NHS at the moment with really what we can do and what impact we can have. So the whole purpose of the People Plan was to say we're experiencing a workforce crisis that we've never experienced before. What small, perhaps, but impactful things can we do out of NGPS to try and make the difference? And from that has come the Flexi Pool, has come Joanna, who has been supporting nurses in practices. We've got 3 nurses who are now coming in, and we are there. We're their practice, as it were, but then we're putting them into our practices and Joanna's supporting them. We've also created a clinical exchange program where 10 GPs and 10 consultants from secondary care are going to share their experiences to try and break down those silos. A corporate induction, if anybody wanted to send any of their new staff to us to try and give them a real sense of why it's brilliant to work in Newcastle, we've got that. And lots of other things. I'm sure I'm doing Chris a bit of a disservice and Joanna a bit of a disservice by whizzing over that. But what we've tried to do is lots of sharp, quick initiatives to concentrate on workforce. The Flexi Pool, That the purpose of that is to put additionality into practices. So we've harnessed the volunteers from the vaccine programme and we've been training them to become HCAs, admin staff, rather than there's nothing about poaching from practices or moving staff around. It's about training those folk and adding additionality into practices and giving practices the ability to try before they buy, so to speak, and to try those people and to use them if they so wish. The Fed sustainability is really important. You know, we were really rocked, as you can imagine, by what happened in 2021. And in order for us to really do everything that we want to do, we need to ensure that we're going to be around for a long time. I'd love for us to become an anchor organisation to support our practices. So we've done quite a lot of work around diversifying our income, exploring our longer term sustainability, cost savings, etc., etc. So I couldn't help but try and get into that financial scrutiny piece a little bit as well. Okay, I feel like I've gone on a little bit there, and I really would like to open it up to any questions. We've had a couple more people join as the call has gone on. So I'm going to stop sharing because it's just tricky to see everybody. But I'd love to welcome any questions that anyone has at all. We'll have that awkward silence, and then somebody will hopefully feel terrible and think, oh, last one. Mike, it was you last year, so you don't have to. Equally, any comments, any feedback, up for challenge? I never know if silence is a good thing.
Any hands up?
Can I just come in, Rebecca? I can't put my hand up. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Is that David?
So it's David Jones, just from Throckley. Just asking, what do you see as your greatest challenges in the year ahead as a federation?
You've been working with the ICB, David, and writing a primary care strategy.
Seems like it, doesn't it?
So as a federation or as general practice?
Well, I think as a federation, really.
So I think that longer term, our long term, if we want to do all the things that I'd really like us to do, then we need long-term sustainability as an organisation. And for that, what I'd really like is the backing of the ICB, David. It would be wonderful if that long-term sustainability could be recognised, and our provision into primary care could be supported in that way. That's, as a federation, I think it would be fair to say that's a risk. But I think the second risk, so that's a financial one, is that we lose the buy-in of our members. So there's 0 point in us existing unless pretty much all the practices in Newcastle want us to exist. And when you're a member organisation, that's a constant challenge and something that you've got to deliver against all the time. It's a risk, but equally, I would say it's no different to any company that exists out there that has shareholders, because ultimately our obligation is to you as shareholders. So I would say the biggest risk is financial. The second risk is the longer term buy-in from our members, because that's what we need to survive. Would you agree, Nat? Is there anything that I've missed?
Absolutely. I think in terms of primary care, I mean, that's, on massively on our agenda, isn't it? Trying to get in sort of a pithy statement and a one-slide picture of the challenges of primary care, because that's uppermost in everyone's mind. But I think you've detailed the federation challenges.
Yeah.
I think we've nailed the place in the system challenge, which most federations struggle with.
Yeah, I feel good when I talk to other CEOs. You can't sort of help doing that comparison, and that always makes me feel a bit good.
And we are, people are jealous in other areas that we do have the 7 PCN clinical directors as our board, because it's pretty rare to have that sort of cohesion in a single place. There are many places that have more than one federation in a small area, so we're very lucky we've got the one, and everyone is totally linked. So
and I suppose that the last one I'd point out that I kind of worry about the financial stability and the team and the kind of longer term stability around risk. But actually, as Wes Streeting or the policy exchange document or various other headlines come through regularly, what's dictated from above and what primary care might look like over the next 5-10 years could be a threat to a federation, or it could be a wonderful opportunity, but that lingers in terms of, you know, feeling a sense of a kind of lack of control, but I suspect everybody feels. Mindful that Mike said it. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Fire away.
I'm under orders to make sure I hold you all to account, so I'm doing my job. So 2 questions. So one is, obviously last year Chris talked about the losses sustained by LZIC and how that would roll into this year. Last year NGPS was still in profit. This year you've made a loss overall, but you say you're back in profit now. I guess the question is, one, how do we cover those losses and make sure it doesn't happen again? And the second thing is, if we're divesting all the practices that you've been operating, and particularly the LZIC practice, what does that mean for the practices in the west of the city?
Okay, thanks, Mike. Good question. So first one around the loss. So we did touch upon this last year because it was clear that the loss was going to be pretty substantial. The way that what we've done is we've used reserves that were built up over the course of 6 years to recoup that loss. And that was a really difficult decision for the CDs that they had to make within about 8 weeks of becoming CDs. The reason we were able to do that is because for a long time we had been building those up. The thing that we really tussled with is this is our fault. We let our eye off the ball, so we should fix it. And in other areas, folks have gone to wider, bigger organisations and said, bail us out, help us out. And we didn't want to do that. And that's what we tussled over, that decision. So we sorted it out in-house, Mike. And as you can see from, as you will see from this year's accounts, we're through that. Is that enough? Or do you want me to talk more about that, Mike? Because it's a tricky subject, that one.
I think it's always frustrating.
Answered.
Yeah, I think we can probably leave it there. I think it's always frustrating knowing that you've got so much information from the current financial year, but we're looking 11 months into the past.
Yeah, and what maybe one of the things that would just be good is if we just had our AGM sooner, and we could have done that this year. We got our accounts, we pushed our accountants to have our accounts done within 4 months of the year end, and we should have done it sooner. So we'll take that as a learning. There's no reason why we can't do that next year, is there? No, so we'll take that as a learning, Mike. Let's try and have it earlier next year. I mean, another thing we could do is mid-year, we could do a financial review of the Fed with all our members. It might just be you and me, Mike, but maybe, you know, I'm up for that. The CDs do see that every month. We've got a pretty good financial report now and a full set of dashboards. But that's the first question around how did we deal with that, and is it a threat, an ongoing threat? It's not an ongoing threat, and it's dealt with. The second question around LZIC and the citywide, and yes, you're right, we are divesting all of our practices, and that's on the grounds that I think I'll say this again just for anyone that's wondering why, if we are truly going to equally support all of our practices, it's incredibly hard to do that if we're throwing a huge amount of resource and time, and a disproportionate amount of time and resource into a small number of practices. The ICB have had 12 months notice. We gave them our intention to pull away from the contract in April last year, and they've had 12 months to put arrangements in place. And those arrangements, what they're going to look like is still a little bit uncertain. But my sense is that they've been laying the groundwork, and that I tried to ask them yesterday what the plan was, and couldn't get a response. But we're pushing and seeking to get one as soon as possible. Mindful that the staff team as well need a bit of a resolution. I think if the ICB were here, they would say it came at a very difficult point for them. They were in a bit of a vacuum in terms of how they dealt with this, who they went to. They didn't know, they didn't have a primary care commissioning committee, for example, for a while. So that's delayed things a little bit.
I think the other thing to add in terms of, I think your question is about, what does the divestment of LZIC mean for the west of the city? I think it's important to make the point that that practice is now turned around and is financially stable and viable. So whatever happens to whoever takes on is actually taking on a decent practice that's washing its own face.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, Nat. But the truth is that there are financially stable and viable practices all over the city that can't find partners and can't find staff. So it might be that the practice is in a good position, but there's no one to take it over. And this is always the risk if any of us hand back our contracts, whether it's one of the partnerships or whether it's NGPS, is that the ICB will be left with no option but to disperse the list.
Yeah, tricky, because obviously the ICB have to be really careful with what they tell us about the process, but they are allowed to tell us that there have been expressions of interest.
A number of.
Yeah. So
it's difficult talking that, isn't it? Because we don't know anything for certain, but the mood very much is that they would not disperse the list because it's too big a practice and the impact on other practices surrounding it would be too great. But that's just anecdotal kind of discussions rather than anything formal.
And I think that was Marie's question, but I'll just put up the chat so we can see that. Yeah, there are, Marie. We don't know how many, we've just been told a number, as in not a number, but several. Anybody else got any other questions for us? Marie.
Sorry, mine's just around workforce. I am concerned in the Outer West of workforce and sustainability practices, managing workloads, and is there anything that is out there that can be done to help and support the practices? I think as Throckley has managed, we've crumbled ourselves over recent weeks. I've reached out for FlexiPool and still struggled with FlexiPool staff, and often have that little bit of wobble, I would say, and I think that is happening more and more. And your concern is, are practices going to turn around and hand their contracts back? And where are we? It just feels like there's a big, massive black hole out there, and feels that obviously the NHS is broken, but how do we then pick up the pieces and manage the workload and try and keep everybody sane, I guess, to manage the day-to-day workload, and that goes from the domestic staff coming in right the way through up to GPs, because it's having a massive impact on all of the team.
I think, Marie, you're not alone in feeling like that. I think all of us in all of our practices have had days or have days where that's the case for everyone. And as Mike previously mentioned, there are many practices that have been teetering kind of on the edge of, you can feel as if financially things are going okay, and then suddenly everything goes up the creek without the proverbial paddle. Our main focus, the 7 CDs coming together, we're all jobbing GPs, we're all partners in practices who really feel those pressures day to day. So our whole focus is about what can we do as a single entity, as an NGPS doing things once, to try and provide any stability that we can. And our main focus when we're feeding into sort of the system type meetings are championing the cause of general practice, about estates, about workforce. A lot of the work that we're doing within NGPS about all the training in the Flexi Hub is absolutely about providing additionality of staff and keeping those staff working here. And our real vision is, to make Newcastle a place that people want to come to work to and want to stay and work here and not go elsewhere. So I wish I had the magic answer for you. I hope that you can feel some sense of solidarity in that, you feed into a primary care network with a CD who is very passionate about general practice and what we can do to support it. And we all join together once a month on our board to discuss those views and to feed them into the wider system. And, we spend our days beating the drum for general practice and not letting the bigger system forget about us. On that note, I will just put a plug in. Please, please, please declare your Opal scores.
Yeah.
Every meeting I go to, sorry, I'm really going to sound like a blooming nagging headmistress, aren't I, or something, but every meeting that we go to, the only thing the system cares about is Opal. And I know it doesn't mean much to us in primary care because the descriptors don't mean much to us, but when the hospitals are saying, oh, we're Opal 4, we're Opal 3, they look at the dashboard and say, oh, well, primary care is all right, general practice is only Opal 1, so we'll push some more work their way. So I can't reiterate enough how desperately important it is. We must have people declaring you should be Opal 2 every day, and that's on a good day. A lot of days you'll be Opal 3, but if you do not declare it, it's really hard for me in those system-wide meetings to actually say, here is the evidence that primary care is about to fall over. So please let me just add that final plea, and I promise I'll stop nagging.
I was just going to respond to Bridget around the FlexiPool. The FlexiPool is a work in progress. We're developing it. It's never going to be the magic bullet. We're bringing people into primary care that have never worked in primary care before, because otherwise we end up with we're poaching Peter to pay Paul, and we really don't want to do that. So I would please talk to us about that. Give us your feedback. Emily's leading on the FlexiPool and has got a brilliant team, but we need to develop it with you and with your support. I'm really sorry if something's happened and it hasn't gone quite right, but give us that feedback and just, we have a workforce crisis, and we're not going to be able to fix that at NGPS. We're going to do our darnest to do those small impactful things, but there is a crisis, a much, much wider crisis that we are banging the drum about. And trying to do as many of these initiatives as we can to lighten that load a little bit. Sorry, Marie.
It's fine. I just feel perhaps the FlexiPool, and I know a lot of the staff do need training and the skills, because I guess perhaps it was my impression of, oh, well, I could just pick up the phone or fill in a form and say I could have somebody who was trained and would come in and step straight into that role. Yes. Unfortunately, it's not the case. And you've got someone who has got some admin experience, but unfortunately, when you're already short-staffed, you can't afford the time to train somebody to do the job on the day. So is there anything that we could do as practices just to help to get those staff ready, so when we are in a crisis on the day, that we can pick up the phone and say, have you got anybody, and they can come and hit the ground running, basically, because at the minute we can't, and I just see it as more of a hindrance. And I don't mean to be derogatory in any way, but we can't afford to spend somebody to train somebody to do the job when you're already pulled left, right and centre.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. And I went to see Gosforth Memorial recently, and they said exactly the same thing. So I think that's a really good bit of feedback. I think we need to get these people, and some of them are ex-flight attendants and folk that have Chris. So we need to put them in before the crisis, I suppose. And Gosforth Memorial said the same, Bridget. Everyone's happy to train, but perhaps not on a day of crisis.
It's a very good point, though.
Helpful, yeah. And we'll take that on. That's brilliant. Thanks, Marie. Anyone else with any questions? Got 5 more minutes.
Sorry, can I have another nag about enhanced hours on a Saturday? certainly in the Outer West Hub. We've got lots of capacity which we can't use because the skill set doesn't match what we actually need. And the big bugbear is bloods. So we've
Marie,
hit a
can I just
crisis.
quickly
Yeah.
butt in? Marie, I
Yeah.
discussed this and we're in discussion at this very minute about
okay.
it. So it is being dealt with. I'll speak to you tomorrow, but we've had some more discussions today. So
Brilliant,
that's
thank
fine.
you.
Sorry.
Just for the benefit of others on the call who won't hear from Bridget, it's been a topic of discussion in our weekly place meetings that we have with the ICB team since October. Well, before that probably. They are making some progress on it, but it's unfortunately not quite as simple as we would all expect it to be. It's to do, they're writing an SOP, they've got an MOU to sort out, it's discussions with the lab and NUS about capacity. They don't have the workforce for the weekend to suddenly accept a whole load of primary care bloods. It's even down to the simple things like not having a courier service in situ. So as much as we are all extraordinarily frustrated in these meetings, and we try to be kind to David and his colleagues and not shout at them too much, it's the fault lies with NHS England once again writing a DES, not thinking it through, insisting on what needs to be done, but not really thinking about the practicalities. And unfortunately, things like laboratory services, you can't just switch on. And it seems ludicrous to all of us that it takes so long, but they are working on it. And I genuinely believe that the ICB team are doing what they can to try and resolve the issue. And we are making slow but definite progress.
And maybe what we need to do for the practices, I'm thinking to a bit differently going forward, is maybe do a bit more of a regular evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a bit of a comms to say, this is what's happened this week in this direction. We have written an MOU. We have got it approved, some sort of evidence of action. And because I hear you're me in the meeting today saying this has been months, what on earth's going on?
Yeah, actually one of our actions from the week before last was that we would start doing a bit more of a not another bulletin, but like a newsletter.
Yeah,
because there are lots of topics like this that the CDs, in various of us in different meetings and when we come together with the ICB, are raising lots of examples like the midwife bloods, like inclisiran, these cholesterol injections or something. There are loads of little quite trivial things really that we are talking about and bringing in, that different practices bring to us that we take to them. And we are acutely aware that not everything gets quickly fed back. Thank you, Bridget, for your comment in the chat. I've just found out today that from the 13th of February, midwifery blood results will no longer come back to general practice. It's only been 3 years that I've been campaigning for this, so it feels like a small win in the big system. So yes, occasionally we have a small win, but yes, a newsletter I think would be a good idea, just so that we can update you, so that everybody gets the same information. I think that's something that we're planning to take forward.
Yeah. Right, folks, 6:42. Anything else from anybody?
I think it's probably about it.
Yes. Just a reminder to everybody from Sarah about the pushback email address as well for the trust. Thought BJ was going to come in there. So just Sarah saying, please use the pushback emails for the trust for things that they should be doing. Pre-clinic blood, sit notes, post-op. They should be delivering 4 weeks of meds from clinics, etc.
And I think that's another good example where, because of the relationships that all the CDs are building with NUS, with the ICB, Sarah's pushback letter, the midwife, they're small things, but it shows that if we keep at it and talk as one voice, we can actually make some differences that will make a difference to our lives in general practice. So, keep talking to us and let's keep fighting the fight. Arousing, isn't it? I think we're probably drawing to a close then. We've got 1 minute left, and I think we just really want to say a massive thank you to you all for turning out tonight. I think this is the best attendance we've ever had at an AGM, and I'd like to think it's because you want to see our beautiful faces now that Rebecca and I are leading the team. But thank you all for joining, and please remember, you know, problems and queries, go to your CD. Then we join as a board monthly, and we can take on issues and do our very best for you.
Hope you all have a lovely evening, and we'll call it to a close. And thank you to all of the team for coming here tonight as well.
Okay.
Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. We get all the